Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Sam Butcher from Labster, and I'm delighted to be hosting this session. Thank you all for joining us here today for this panel discussion on how we can transform science education in a post-COVID world. Over the past 7 months, COVID has resulted in a huge number of science courses having to move online. And this represents a really significant change in the way that we've been teaching science. However, that said, moving to an online format is not inherently transformative. So what we'll be doing in this session is taking a look forward beyond the logistics of how lessons are delivered. And today we'll be discussing how things have changed, what needs to change, and some of the challenges we all face when trying to make these changes. We'll address important topics, including how we can foster important competencies for 21st century students, and what lessons we'll all take away from the pandemic as educators and administrators to take COVID and turn it into a catalyst for positive change. Now, before we begin, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. The first is if you need to leave the session early, don't worry, the session will be recorded and we'll be sending the recording out to everyone in the next few days. And secondly, we'll be saving a good amount of time at the end of this session for a question and answer segment. So please do all go to slido.com on your computer or your phone and enter the hashtag ScienceOnline2020, all one word, and we'll pose your questions to our four panelists. So that again is slido.com and the hashtag ScienceOnline2020. And now what I'd like to do is take a moment to introduce you all and to welcome our four panelists. So on our panel today, we are joined by Dr. Jennifer Hearne Bobenko, Chairperson of the Institutional Review Board and Professor of Biochemistry at University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. We also have Dr. Moustapha Diack, Doctoral Program in Sciences, Math and Education at the College of Sciences and Engineering at Southern University, Baton Rouge. We're also joined by Dr. Leslie Kennedy, Senior Director for Academic Technology Services at the California State University System, and Terri Quenzer, Statewide Director for Life Sciences and Biotechnology for the California Community College System. And so let's jump right in. I wanted to start by talking about the lab. So pre-COVID, very little changed over a very long period of time in the way in which we taught labs over the years. And now instructors are having to use much more technology in their teaching of science lab courses. I'm really curious to hear how instructors have found this. And I wanted to ask the question, do you see a change in how science instructors perceive the use of educational technology in lab classes? So Terri, I thought I'd start with you on this one. How have instructors found the change?
Well, so thank you, Sam. And you have to remember that if you think about it, if we were going to change to an online format, with all the planning involved and the pilot and the switching over, it would probably take 3 to 5 years in a system as big as ours. The California community colleges have 115 colleges. And so if you think about in that context that our faculty had to switch to online teaching in 1 to 2 weeks, that changed, they turned it on a dime, and that was phenomenal. So I think that COVID-19 has caused a huge shakeup in the system, and I think in a good way, because a lot of the benefits of online teaching have now really become embedded in the programs, and I think that's going to be a change that's here to stay.
Absolutely, great to hear. And so I wanted to actually ask the same question, Jennifer, to you as well. You're involved in teaching, of course, and you will see a lot from your peers as well. Have you found that things have been similar out on the East Coast, or have you seen something slightly different?
Yes, so thank you for the introduction, Sam. I think that the pandemic has allowed us to understand that what we considered normal in the past maybe wasn't as good as we thought it was for all students, and perhaps created an unequal playing field for traditional versus non-traditional students. In terms of faculty, the pandemic really pushed us to use learning management systems and other educational technologies such as Labster that were not used or underutilized in course delivery. And so while we were forced to use them and spin quickly from face-to-face to online, faculty that were exposed to these technologies are finding that it can make a difference in terms of access, affordability, and achievement. And these are three large goals of education. And so we need to keep them in mind as we push forward. So to me, when I think about a lab, there are two separate students that I'm serving. I'm serving majors and I'm serving non-majors. And Labster offers a meaningful and much less costly alternative to provide non-majors a laboratory experience using real-world simulation. So they're put into a real life situation rather than put into a wet lab with no context. And for our majors, I find that it offers access to very sophisticated protocols that are either cost prohibitive or too time intensive to use in the laboratory. And I want to get back to the non-traditional student access. Online teaching may help bring non-traditional students all science majors to do so much face-to-face laboratory experiments that we may have cut them out of the science majors. So I see this as a large gain, not only for our traditional students, but our non-traditional students as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And that's, I think, a really interesting point to pick up on there. And I think, Moustapha, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. As someone who's been in the space of science education for such a long time, and perhaps I think seen better than a lot of folks, how things have changed with perhaps more non-traditional students coming into the fold of science education. Do you see this too as a potential opportunity for us to make the most of, to bring more non-traditional students into the sciences?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's really a huge opportunity that we really need to seize here. And I'm talking, us as educators. For instance, Labters are providing, solution for, science education. Because what I have seen seriously through COVID, that is just disruption of what we used to call really the technology adoption life cycle, where you used to have really the innovators, the early adopters, and after that, you get to a point where you touch, the case of faculty who are totally refuting the use of any form of technology in the classroom. Now, what had been quite frankly positive is that, and I think Jennifer and Terri touched on that. If you look at an institution of Southern University, which is a historically Black college and university, we were pushed during last summer and spring semester during a period of 1 month to be able really to move everything that the majority of our faculty used to do in face-to-face and to bring that in an online environment. Now, the beauty of the thing at some point here, if I may use this term, because for us who used to push early adopters and innovators, we don't have to play that role anymore because our own administration are helping us in fulfilling that goal. Faculty don't have a choice but trying to adopt the technology that have been made available to be able really to deliver online, whatever the modality it is. And face-to-face modality being phased out during that period, that push really the the faculty really to use, those kind of learning environment. The way I do know that, and I'm sure during this discussion, we're going to be talking maybe about some issues dealing with barrier, but the misconception that we had before, on teaching even lecture course using technology, was not very, very accepted. We have fought for many years to try really to get the faculty to embrace that. Now we're going to get all those faculty on board now. What are we going to do to be able to retain them there, for them to see the value of bringing technology to support what they're doing? Students really that are really very, very used to technology, what's going to be the value added of using virtual learning environment, instead of using really cookbook laboratory experiment that they used to do? I'm just expecting after COVID, really a lot of transformation really to take place in there. That's a very, very exciting period that we living in, and we need to leverage it. We really need to leverage it.
Absolutely. I think this is a great segue into the next question I have, but there's something you mentioned there that I really picked up on that resonated with me as a question that I think we all have to ask, which is, what do we do to retain that sort of usage from faculty members of the technologies and the tools and the skills that they've gained through COVID to help drive a positive and meaningful change going forward? And so really that does, as I say, tie in really well, I think, to the next question that I have, which is something I touched upon in my introduction. So COVID has acted as a catalyst for change. And I'm really interested to hear everyone's thoughts on what do we need to change and what do we need to continue to change going from this point forward. So I think for this one, I'd like to really just open up to the group to see if anyone has any jumping off points that we can start with. So what do we need to change?
So I'll jump in and start on this. And of course, coming from the community college perspective, our focus with our students is to create a workforce. So we're training them with hands-on skills so that they can join the workforce, or they can transfer to a four-year college and join the workforce later. So it's from that perspective, it's very important to get them as involved as possible. And one of the great things with LabSter and other programs that have sort of come to be because of COVID. I know LabSter was around before COVID, but from the faculty perspective and the student perspective is that the students are learning. They're able to, through online simulations, get at least visual virtual experience in doing the labs. And so what the faculty at the community colleges are finding are that the students, they're worried about limited amount of time that they do get to have face-to-face labs. And right now for essential courses, and biotech is considered essential, the students do get to come into the campuses for hands-on training. But what the faculty are finding is that it's more efficient because the students have done these simulations, so they at least know what to expect when they get into the lab and they actually do the hands-on part of it. So it's much quicker and easier, and they can fit a lot more into shorter lab periods or condensed timing, where it's more like a boot camp style training rather than across a whole semester. And then they're able to continue with online training so that they're out of the labs in case everything shuts down again due to COVID. So it's been flexible. And I think another piece of the change is that the technology has to be such that it's accessible to all students, and so that they can work on their mobile devices if they don't have a computer. Sorry, I have uncontrollable dogs. I'll go ahead and pass this on because they're being noisy right now.
No worries. Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Quenzer. Really interesting insight and very much appreciated. Now, I'd love to hear, we've heard from the community college side. I'd love to hear from the university side. Is what Terri shared there in line with how you've seen things change? Is there anything that you would add or anything that's been different for you, say, perhaps Leslie, this could be one for you, taking a look at the sort of the California connection with, of course, I believe, is it about 50% of your students coming through from the California community colleges? If there's any kind of connection there.
Yep. Yes, we are always excited to be collaborating with community colleges because 50% of our students transfer from there into our system, which comprises of 485,000 students, 23 universities, and 28,000 faculty. So we're already planning for the post-pandemic instructional environment. We're already meeting about it. We're talking about it. What it is, what the changes that we see coming will be making sure that we have an infrastructure for faculty that Moustapha mentioned have never really explored this area of using educational technology to support their instruction, and to make sure that those resources are available, and also infrastructure such as instructional designers, other types of resources like that. So we're looking more at a hybrid, emphasizing hybrid instructional models, more simulation labs, such as what Labster provides, and to reinforce the instruction, as Terri mentioned, potentially shorten the time period in the labs, and or reinforcing. A lot of our students are first generation university students, and then a lot of underrepresented minorities. We have a large group of students who really would benefit. In fact, all of our students would benefit from multiple reinforcements in their instructional environments, especially the first couple years that they are in the university setting. So that's what we're focused on, and we will see more. We believe we'll see more adoption of these tools and these instructional models, including online, fully online courses, because the non-traditional student, as Jennifer mentioned, and also many of our students who are working full-time in various capacities would benefit from receiving their instruction in various modalities, including completely online or in a hybrid format. I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing really, really interesting insights. Now, I'm curious to hear from what you've shared there. It sounds like there is there are plans already in place to transition to providing a greater variety of different offerings, looking at hybrid, more online, and supporting more non-traditional students. It's really exciting to hear. So I'm just very curious to hear quickly from the other folks that we have on the panel. Is this something that we're seeing across the other institutions represented here today?
So I think we should capitalize on the momentum and encourage universities, faculty, and accrediting bodies to accept online courses and virtual laboratory experiences in the delivery of science courses. Generally, science courses have been cut out of online delivery methods due to the traditional thought that you must be present in a lab to learn the protocol and procedure. I think we can use this time to begin to reimagine the entire four-year university experience so that it is amenable to science majors and teaching through an online experience. So I think we need to grab on tight and make as many good, positive changes moving forward that we can, so that we don't get 10 years from now, we're not looking back saying, oh geez, I wish we had really used this time to change the four-year experience. I think we just need to do it. And what I mean by that is, imagine having a 3-year theoretical online lecture experience and then 1 year of intensive laboratory experience on a campus that's focused solely on the major rather than various majors. That doesn't mean we're cutting out the lab experience in the first 3 years. It just means we're going to provide it through an online mechanism such as Labster in preparation to bring them onto campus for their practical experience.
Yeah, and I think that's quite frankly, I would say, Sam, your panel here touched on basically the key elements in there. But I just wanted to add something, and if I had to put it somehow, really, I would just say, now that COVID had pushed you to adopt now technology, let me now show you what you can do with it. And this really, pushes to think a different dimension. The first dimension is really the best practices. We need really to make sure that the early adopters that are coming on board, we provide them with documented really best practices that work in the classroom that can change a little bit their perception prior to COVID. The second thing is we need really to reemphasize also this issue of professional development that tie into the first element that I really talked about earlier. And the last, not the least, is really to be able to have companies like, for instance, Labster, to help us at some point to promote some level of effectiveness research so that for all our administrators that are really chancing technology for the first time, for us to be able to document that. Using the technology in the classroom can change the learning outcome of your student, and create some kind of academic success at some level. This, in my opinion, is really critical, and it is also upon you to look at really, some research development to be able to improve on the tools, some more realistic tools, assignment that are more realistic, for at least students to be able to use, that simulate better what's going on in a real laboratory. That's really upon, for instance, an organization like Labster to help us, really develop really tools that are really excellent. I heard about talking about integrating VR, the virtual reality, augmented reality in all those things. So it's maybe, time for your company to be able to contribute at that level as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you raised critical areas for focus there for not just educators and administrators within higher education, but also for industry. We at Labster have a huge role that we feel we can play in doing things like, for example, bringing together those communities of practice and helping to bring people together to drive forward some of those things like research projects. So really, really critical things shared there. Thank you so much for sharing those. And now what I wanted to do here was actually turn back to Moustapha for the next question. And really what I want to dive into here is we've highlighted that the potential for COVID to act as a catalyst to change, but what are the barriers? What are the barriers for academic implementation of educational technology? And I believe you may have touched upon a couple of things there, but I'm curious to hear if you have anything further to share there on the challenges that we'll face and perhaps even how we might address them.
Yeah, if I may add a little bit, and I'm not going to get into the many issues, the many barriers, because I am sure that the panel that we have here with Leslie, and Jennifer, and Terri, we can have a list of it, starting with supporting faculty. We don't have money, faculty are not being recognized for really bringing technology. But I'm going to be a little bit more, sophisticated at some level, because Jennifer touched on it already when we talk about accrediting agency. If my university, Southern University, is being accredited by an organization that is called SACS, the university and the colleges going to do everything that they can do to comply to the rule of SACS. If I take, for instance, some statement from, let's say, the National Science Teacher Association and NSTA and the American Chemical Society have taken some position, for instance, that hands-on mean that students must physically touch the material rather than do science on a computer. That had been in the past really a position that was at some level, really, in my opinion, some kind of barrier really to adoption. Computer simulation that mimic laboratory procedures have the potential to be useful supplement to student hands-on activities, but not a substitute to them. This is a new version of, the American Chemical Society statement. This came basically post-COVID, really, when they realized that technology can still help now. Why don't we try, to use some kind of hybrid model, really, to be able to implement these for really different reasons? We can have a lot of argument in there, like laboratory waste, limiting those can be just one of the arguments I can put in there. The second argument is that there are some experiments, there is no way you're going to be able to do it in the laboratory. Radioactive, for instance, material to be able to simulate, to do that practically in the lab, or the gas law, for instance, while we're thinking about chemistry, some of those are really impossible. Why don't we mix these kind of two? So I was just wanting to focus on that accreditation and just make the argument that really, that's not one or the other one, but what would be the best way to use the two so that the student learning outcome is improved. Yeah, that's really what I wanted to add to that. I'm sure your panelists are going to have a lot of information on that as well.
So I absolutely agree. Any other thoughts from our other panelists today on this topic?
Well, I'd like to just say that I completely agree with Moustapha on the accreditation, because I actually have experience with this. We had our medical lab technician program. Those students were sent home from their clinicals when COVID-19 hit. And I was working very hard with the state of California to get them to accept the lab simulations in order for the students to complete their practicum and to be able to graduate on time. And it was extremely challenging, and we were not able to get that through. It was a big fight. And so the students did have to come back, and special arrangements were made to get them that hands-on portion, get them into some of the clinical rotations. But Moustapha is absolutely correct. The students, we need to remove that barrier so that these simulations can be seen as acceptable for allowing students to complete their programs.
Absolutely, very interesting. And now I'm just noticing I need to be mindful of time because we're almost ready to go into our Q&A portion. But before we do so, I have one final question that I wanted to pose to Leslie. I'm curious to hear, especially with your position and your perspective, how have perceptions of online learning and education technology changed? And how have you seen those perceptions change since the advent of COVID?
So across the spectrum, and I think it's been touched upon also by Moustapha, for example, that what we were doing before, and we were kind of in our stuck, I wouldn't say stuck in our ways, but we were following a path that we've been doing for a long time. Very traditional modes of instruction were taking place, and now we had to pivot. And so the ability to actually potentially instruct students in this new and virtual, or we initially called it remote environment, became a reality. And so the perception of online learning having changed is significant. Not always positive, not always negative. We trained several faculty, over 2,000 this summer, in our own quality learning and teaching quality matters courses at the CO or the Chancellor's office. And the surveys that we received back was that they felt more comfortable, but not comfortable enough to be fully online. Their concerns were still around diminished student learning, how the students were going to be engaged. So there's still lots of challenges there in regards to the perception of using or teaching in this type of environment. For those who did not choose to do this, right? Who in the traditional sense, most online instruction has been selected by the instructor and the students and the administrative structure that's been built around it. But it's been quite a challenge for our faculty and students to adjust. And so we've done the best we can. We've had lots of challenges with the digital divide with our students, broadband access, lots of different solutions being proposed for that and having been implemented. And also just the concerns around using the tools effectively, the tools that are available. Assessment has been a big challenge and a concern for faculty, and of course the labs. And we've been very pleased that we have this option to provide Labster. And as Terri said, we have nursing programs that also were pulled out of their clinicals. So, but we were able to get the State Board of Nursing, I think it is, to approve temporarily some of those measures. But it was very difficult. We had to get the governor to sign that. So it was quite challenging. Anyway, so we actually continue some of that. We've been able to extend that as well. So the perceptions are all over the place, and we are, as we said, looking to the future to work with those faculty and students and programs that we can potentially continue to provide these alternative ways or ways to enhance and reinforce learning using digital tools and digital resources effectively. And as Moustapha said, it's all about the best practices, et cetera. So, but the faculty are very concerned. I'm looking at a survey right now. We had 980 responses from our faculty, and over 75% were considered that the biggest concern for them was student perception of learning. And not being the communication factor as well. How do you communicate with your students? Even though there are discussion boards, we all have Zoom, but still just that connection that's potentially not happening in this environment. I'll stop there.
I think there's so much that we'll be learning over the next few months and even years. It presents, I think, something of an interesting opportunity for research and figuring out how to communicate effectively in an online space, not just in higher education, but in many different environments. So the kind of data that you're pulling with these surveys, I think, is incredibly insightful and valuable. Thank you so much for sharing. And now we've run over a little bit, but I think we can jump now into our Q&A portion, and we've got some great questions that have come through already. So I thought I would start at the top here, but it looks like we've got the screen being shared here as well. So the first one I think is one for us to pose back to Dr. Terri Quenzer. So Terri, you mentioned that you had to make a turn on a dime, and the question is, what would you say is the biggest learning that that you've had, or that the instructors within the community college system have had?
I'm not sure what that learning is yet, because it's evolving. And I think one big learning is that it's possible and it can be done. And we often think it takes so much more to make change, but when we absolutely have to do it, we can. And it shows a flexibility in the faculty, and a very amazing and impressive flexibility to be able to respond that quickly. So I think it also says that anything is possible.
Fantastic. And any other learnings? I'm curious to hear from the other participants that we have on our panel here. Any other key learnings that anyone would like to share?
Probably one of our, for us, is that you can't copy what you were doing in the face-to-face classroom and just move that into an online classroom. That was probably one of the biggest lessons learned. In other words, if you were lecturing and giving multiple choice tests, you'll need to, we've had some stumbling around that. And so trying to provide faculty strategies to work with around those strategies for instruction has been a big lesson learned. And I could go on forever on that, but I won't.
Yeah, and I think there is also one aspect that kept me, up pretty much since the beginning of this COVID here. That's just the issue of quality assurance. Because since in a very, very short period of time, we were called upon moving everything that we used to do in our traditional way, at least the majority of the faculty, to an online environment. I'm just wondering if right after COVID, we would not have a tendency of keeping on doing it the way that we used to do it during the pandemic, because we're gonna have to get back to quality standards that we used to work on very, very closely in terms of what are the practices of delivering an online course, how to design it, how to deliver it, how students best learn. But at some point, really during this transition with COVID, there are a lot of things. It was just, emergency situation. We needed to move as quick as possible. And I'm hoping that we don't lose that really through that as well, Some faculty may think that this is the best way to do things. And after COVID, we're going to come up with standards to let you know that here is really the best way that we used to do it before. So those are something that's really critical, I think.
Thanks for sharing. And so before we move on, Jennifer, I'm going to put you on the spot as well. See if you have any key learnings from your side, and then I think we can jump on to the next question.
So what I've learned is that a student's perception of online learning can be linked to the degree of organization in which the faculty member presents the online course. And there are many educational technologies available that one can put into a course. And just using or adding an educational technology doesn't necessarily improve your course. To use a learning management system and many types of educational technologies is haphazard. You have to do both intentionally. And I think the more that faculty are exposed to the learning technologies, the more of a sense of what is good for their course and what can be left behind will come to the top. And so then that meaningful course will begin to evolve. And students are receptive to online learning, provided you meet them halfway. They want to know that you're available. They want to know that you are a real live person, that you're not someone hiding behind an initial on a screen. So I think it's important to still maintain you while you're online. Let students get to know you, see you, and engage them. And I honestly find that being able to teach online provides me with more time to spend with my students. So instead of spending a whole day driving to see a collaborator, I'll meet with my collaborator on Zoom. We can share screens or WebEx, whatever it may be. And that's going to save me 6 hours in the car and so much more time in between for a 1 hour meeting. And there's other 6 hours I have to spend with my students. So this is really helping me to engage more of my students and spend more time with them.
Wonderful to hear. And unexpected, but that's really exciting, really interesting. And
yeah, and Samuel, if I may add to something, because Jennifer was touching on something that really, also, keep me up during the night. What's going to happen really after COVID? We're not going to be able to do things the way we used to do it before. That at least I can, that's something that definitely I expect, seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, thanks so much for sharing this. This is a real eye-opener for me. These questions are far better than the ones I prepared. So I'm going to crowdsource them next time I have a panel discussion. We've got a couple more that have just come through that I really wanted to pose to everyone. So the next one that I have here is, so let's see. Oh, this is a really interesting one. I can't wait to hear the answer to this. Do we think that we'll see a major shift to more courses online for all students, or just to expand the net to help more non-traditional students? I'll open that one up to the floor. I'm curious to hear everyone's responses.
Well, we think in the CSU that there will be more courses and more programs. That's just our prediction, and that's what we're planning for. And of course, we have non-traditional students as well, and we will. We have programs already, a lot of programs for that. So we'll see.
But seriously, if we're doing things very well now, we're going to have a lot of challenges, because you're going to have a lot of faculty who would like to continue delivering courses online, as Jennifer talked about, really the different advantages really in there. And as well for the student, because it's going to be more flexible. But the thing is, when they get online, they would like really to find the level of interaction, the level of engagement, that they would find in a face-to-face class. So the transition going to be made a little bit possible. It depends on how we handle it while we are in it. That's critically important, I think. But it's going to change for sure. Absolutely.
I think that I think we'll find a balance, because some faculty and some students are going to prefer the online classes, where others are going to prefer to go back to the more traditional face-to-face classes. And it depends on administrations and how flexible they allow the faculty and students to be with that. But I think it's going to settle down, or equilibrate, so to speak, to a place where, if faculty are allowed to teach in a manner that they're comfortable teaching, and students get to choose the classes that are delivered in the way that they're most comfortable taking those classes, then it really provides a great opportunity for everybody. Plus, it allows students to not have to physically be on a campus, faculty too, for that matter, if that's not convenient. And with the community colleges, we've noticed that students are taking classes and participating or interacting with campuses in other parts of the state because of the online aspect of this. So I think it opens up flexibility, and it will eventually settle on how this is going to work.
Absolutely.
So now this I think ties in well as my next question. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more. So let's see if we can fit this one in. So out of everything that is changing in education, what should stay? What has worked well that should endure through COVID?
There's, in my opinion, a lot of things that we need really to improve on, because for learning to take place, you need to find a way of building community. That is something I think is, quite frankly, extremely important. So that means really the level of engagement that we have, whether it is on face-to-face to online. Without that level of engagement, seriously, research seems to be showing that learning won't take place. There is no doubt about it. And how we assess learning as well is seriously something as well. We need to focus a little bit more time. Because if we talk about effectiveness research, something to document to our leadership to let them know that this works really well, it is going to be extremely critical that we have modality of measuring those kind of things. So those are, you know, some key stuff that had been here before COVID, but I am sure, you know, it's going to be with us for a while.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think we should keep the mindset that we can try new things in our classroom, and sometimes they will work and sometimes they won't. But I think COVID is going to provide a pivotal point for higher education where faculty feel more free to try new technologies and new ways of reaching their students that perhaps they didn't feel as though they could try before. I know that, and I shared this with you before, Sam, that I've tried to have Labster integrated into my university's science department since maybe 2014. And so it wasn't until the USM On Track program came about due to COVID that the university was receptive to bringing in online lab technology. And I feel without having some prior knowledge, I would have lost out on that opportunity. So, you know, I think faculty need to keep their eyes open, and so do administrators, so that we can continue to implement good change, not necessarily in the time of crisis, but all the time.
I'd like to add also to Moustapha's point about community of practice, because as the statewide liaison for the community colleges between industry and the biotech programs, there was an immediate need that I knew that the faculty needed to be brought together when COVID hit, and started a weekly conference call, Zoom conference call with the faculty around the state. And Sam, you're familiar with that because you've talked to them. And that really has brought faculty closer together, and they're sharing best practices on a weekly basis, and also getting exposed to the same resources and such. So, and that community of practice has really helped, and several collaborations throughout the state have taken place since then. And so to the question of what should we continue after COVID-19, that is one of the things, and that is a model. I mean, I have all of the faculty around the state at my fingertips to be able to do surveys with, and pose questions to, and find out, you know, keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening at the community colleges around the state. And I think that really needs to be done even on a broader level, because whether it's community college or a four-year university or even the high school, you're all in the classroom with the students and trying to teach the material. And it really helps to have this network to be able to fall back on for resources and support.
Absolutely. Oh, Terri, I'm so happy that you're touching back, you're revisiting that aspect there, because that is something that I've been talking with Samuel Butcher for a while, because, you know, we have HBCU, you know, Labster community of 40-something institutions. You know, they have common realities, common culture, and common practices, common needs, you know, creating a community there so that we can contribute in terms of best practices that fit better our students and our faculty is something I've been, you know, sharing a lot with Samuel actually lately. That's really critical. And I am really very, very curious to know what is being done, for instance, within Maryland, with the California State University system, And, you know, with community colleges, you know, those are really things that we need to build, those communities, for sure.
Well, we need to build this together around the country.
You know, here we go. I am ready to go. I am ready to go for that.
Great.
We'll have Sam organize it.
We will do that. We will do that.
Do let me know how we can help. And it sounds like such an exciting prospect to have a countrywide consortium. Of course, Moustapha, the conversations that we've had, the work we've been doing has been incredibly exciting. And I really look forward to driving that forward with you. But it sounds like we have the potential here to expand what we're looking at a little further. But we could talk forever, I think, on these topics by the sound of things. There's so many things to cover, but unfortunately, we have actually overrun by about a minute. So I wanted to see if we can wrap things up now quickly. First, by mentioning that there was one question that we missed, but Leslie has shared a link in the chat here to the CSU statement for faculty regarding the online proctoring question. So I hope that's useful. Leslie, thank you so much for sharing. And of course, thank you so much to our 4 panelists for your fascinating insights. You've certainly given me a lot to think about, and I can't wait to go back over this session and to listen again. So I want to also thank our audience for joining us today. Thank you so much. A couple of final housekeeping items before we leave you here. Of course, any further questions, we have the chat room, which is live through the conference page, where we'll be continuing the conversation. And coming up next, we have our closing keynote with our CEO and co-founder, Michael Bobenko. I'm really excited for this session, and I hope to see you all there. So thank you all so much again. Stay safe. Take care, everybody.